Welcome to Jurassic Park.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind.
Welcome to the party, pal.
I'll be back.
I'll have what she's having.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
Here's looking at you, kid.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello, I'm your host, Jim McLean. Welcome back to another episode of More Than Pixels on a Screen, a spoilerific movie review podcast brought to you by Banterflix, cinematic discussion with a Northern Irish accent. That's us now, bite ye. Do you like your knees, do you? So, joining me very briefly at the start of this podcast is lovely Adam What's Happening Neeson.
Hello.
Adam, you and I, we're not really in this podcast. Well, we are in this podcast. So, because it's Friday the 13th, in December, we thought we would revisit a little Facebook Live that we did earlier in the year when there was a Friday the 13th in October. And yourself and I, the lovely Gav Logan from Fright Club NI, and John Kavanagh, horror aficionado in the Bandflix ranks, chatted all things about the franchise. And I thought we'd revisit that and play it out as a podcast. But because I do a very different introduction on this, I thought I would introduce it here in the studio, play a little clip from a film in the series, and then we'd get stuck into our Facebook Live. So we're not really here this week. Anything you want to get out of your system? Any madness you want to get out, Adam?
What would Jason's theme be if he was from Belfast? Yer,
Smell. Yer. Da. Don't know why I'd smell your dad, but anyway. Could you imagine Jason's Mav? She was from Belfast. Jason, get your fucking hole in here, son. Come here, I slap you.
Although, to be fair, when she gets her head chopped off, her hands would look the same.
Yeah. Tom Savini is hairy knuckles. So yeah, we had a lot of fun in this when we did it. Although you didn't talk a lot during this one.
I wanted the boys to jump in more because they're more not the experts, but talking over Zoom is really hard. So
Yeah.
I sort of was like, I don't need to interject what my favourite yogurt is because that's not the sort of madness that Gav and John are into.
No, it was very much an on-point discussion. We said we'd do it for an hour. We pretty much were in and out in an hour.
Yeah.
Not like a typical, Jim and Adam podcast. But we will be back later in the month. As we said the previous episode, we've loads of Christmas specials coming up. You and I are still kind of working on our Christmas special. Adam, any insight into our non-Die Hard themed episode where our very own Butcher of Castle Street ventures to the Europa and may or may not encounter some terrorists?
It's full of self-indulgent impressions. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's just a standard episode for us. But anyway, so yeah, I think any last silliness you want to get out before we go?
Hold on, I got one. I think in this podcast I get the damn enchiladas wrong. That's actually from 5.
Has that been eating you up inside ever
since? It
since?
has. I was thinking about it a while. I think that's in part 5 or 6 when I said it's in Jason Takes Manhattan, but it's not. But since it's on brand, Billy, them enchiladas from Belgium will run right through me, Billy.
Enjoy the Friday the 13th special. We'll be around for more episodes pretty much soon. And of course, don't forget our Christmas quiz at the Sunflower on the 20th of December. Tickets available through our website. So yeah, let's play a little clip from Friday the 13th.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those 2 others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned. His name was Jason. I was working the day that it happened, preparing meals. Here, I was the cook. Jason should have been watched every minute. He wasn't a very good swimmer. We can go now, dear.
I think we should wait for Mr. Christie.
Oh, that's not necessary.
I don't understand.
Jason. You see, Jason was my son, and today is his birthday.
Where's Mr. Christie?
Oh, I couldn't let them open this place again. Could I? Not after what happened. Oh, my sweet, innocent Jason. My only child. Jason. You let him drown. You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him.
Hello, I'm your host, Jim McLean. Welcome to a special edition of More Than Pixels on the Screen, spoilerific movie review podcast brought to you by Banterflix, cinematic discussion with a Northern Irish accent. And it's Friday the 13th. And more importantly, our Dark Edges Film Festival is nearly upon us. And I thought, why not, get two birds with one stone? Friday the 13th, a horror film festival. I think there's a franchise that deals with Friday the 13th and horror vibes. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about all things Friday the 13th, from the movies, the TV series, video games. There's a massive glut of stuff out there. Comics, books. There's a TV series, Crystal Lake, that I know's in some kind of limbo at the minute. Now, you can see on our little live stream here on Facebook, I'm joined by there's four of us, and we're four counsellors. We're going to be talking about this franchise, and as always, I'm joined by the man who definitely ch-ch-chs when it's Adam. What's happening, Neeson?
I want it to be, ma. The Belfast parts with Jason.
I'll have to scrap the whole thing. Have to start the whole thing again. The joys of live. Adam can't be funnier than me. What can I say? You're the Tommy to my Jason. You're my nemesis deep down. But also, we have some special guests, Adam. We have Gav Logan from the Fright Club, and we have not a researcher, because we discussed this. We have a lecturer at Ulster University, John Kavanagh. Hello to you both, our little counsellors here at Crystal Lake.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
We don't call it Camp Blood. We don't call it Camp Blood. We can't call it Camp Blood. They don't allow that. Anyway, so we're talking about Friday the 13th, and we could go through film by film. We don't have that much time, unfortunately. There's a lot of them. There's 9 sequels. We have the Nightmare on Elm Street crossover. We have the remake, which I think was the last big screen outing for Jason. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. There was the TV series, as I mentioned, that was out for a while, kind of spin-off from that. We have the video game, all that stuff I've already kind of mentioned. And there's Crystal Lake, that is in some sense, I think is still on. It's got his new showrunner. I think it was Brian Fuller, I think was attached to that. He's left that project. So I'm going to come to you first, Adam. And remember, we are live, so please say fucking bugger. But are you a fan of Friday the 13th? The series, just generally, before we get into the specifics of talking about our favourite movies within the series. Because I know John Kavanagh was very excited when I messaged him and said, do you want to talk about Friday the 13th? And he said, yes, please. But Adam, are you a fan of this series?
I think out of all of the horror icons, Friday the 13th is like the guilty pleasure of them all, because I wouldn't exactly say any of them are particularly good movies. Like, you can point to like a Freddy or a Chucky and say, well, at least the movie's good, whereas Friday the 13th is a bit miss more than hit. But you can't deny the enjoyable nature of watching Jason kill so many counselors, whether it be throwing them out a window, putting them in a body bag or a sleeping bag and hitting them. He's the variety killer. He's always shown with a machete, yet he's the one killer that has used more items to kill people than anybody else I can think of.
He likes to spice things up, as does his ma. I mean, you haven't mentioned his ma. You know, everyone remembers from Scream, you know, she's the killer in the first one. Sorry, kids, by the way, if you've never seen Friday the 13th, go back to it. It's a 1980 film. You know, fucking watch it. All right? Okay. So, John, I'm going to come to you because you've kind of let the cat out of the bag when I messaged you about this, and you were like, yes, please. But Gav, I know, as from the Fright Club, I know you're a horror fan, but where does Friday the 13th weigh in for you?
For me, I do love the franchise as a whole. I have great admiration and appreciation for Jason Voorhees.
I get a sense there's a but coming here.
There is a but. I do love him as a horror icon. He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of horror villains. But a bit like Adam, I wouldn't say that I love any particular film within the franchise. I think they're all okay and they're all a bit of fun. But unlike something like the Halloween franchise or a Nightmare on Elm Street, or as you said, Adam, you know, the Chucky franchise, there's not really one or maybe one or two you could pick out as your favorite, but they're not great films overall, I think. But Jason as a villain and as a character is right up there with Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, without a doubt, I would agree with you. I mean, I am a fan of Friday the 13th, but it's probably of the big three. I mean, we've all mentioned you've got Halloween, you've got Nightmare on Elm Street. Those are two other series that I love more. The Nightmare on Elm Street was probably one of the first horror films I think I ever watched, so it's always going to have that love. And I know I'm going to be asking you all gents to share your favourite movie within the franchise. I know I have mine. I'll not say it just yet, but I have a very vivid memory of watching that film when I was younger in a TV that my granny got me. God rest her, a little small thing, probably not much bigger than my phone, and watching it in bed and just thinking this was the best thing ever, thinking that I shouldn't be watching it. But like you, and I've rewatched a few of them. I haven't had time, and I was hoping to get back a chance to maybe even look at Crystal Lake Memories, but it's just so long and vast. I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. But I've rewatched some of the films. One I hated before that I actually found myself I quite liked, but I'll keep you in suspense for now. But yes, I think it is kind of cliche, kind of run-of-the-mill slasher fodder stuff from Friday the 13th, but it is without a doubt hugely successful at the box office. They don't cost a lot of money. They genuinely get big returns. I know those were diminished as they went along, and I think it was Jason X holds a special place in my heart. Let's send Jason into space. But I think it's the one, I think, other than the crossover, I think was the biggest to make cost the most, and it had, of course, didn't have the biggest returns. But John, we've kept you in suspense. You were very excited to talk about this, so I'm assuming you are a fan of this series.
I would go a few steps further. I think this is my favourite franchise of any horror.
Good, I'm glad one of you fuckers likes this series.
You have 7 films in a sequence that are all so fun and, to me, fantastic to watch. I think that's a run that I don't think's been beaten. I know it's heavily subjective, but to me, it's the best. And as well, whenever we're talking about slasher films in general, one of the entries perfected the subgenre. So to me, it's just such a strong and important franchise compared to, say, Halloween, which has a lot more misses, I would think. And Nightmare on Elm Street that gets a bit too close to Looney Tunes. Whereas I think with 7 nice, consistent films and love them all.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a weird thing with Friday the 13th because the pop culture character we think of, as I grab my little Jason behind me, so this version of Jason, it's weird. We don't really see this until 6, pretty much. We don't see this until 6, so it's weird when you think of Halloween, you know, Michael Myers, the shape arrives pretty much fully formed. Freddy Krueger, yes, he become famous more for his one-liners near the end, but, you know, it's weird that the series took that long to get there. But could I push you a little bit, John, kind of go back on kind of what you mentioned there and kind of some of the things you're talking about, why you think that, I mean, you've mentioned the hit rates within the franchise, but why you have, if it could push you a little bit more, such love for the Friday the 13th series?
Uh, where do we even start? I remember my parents bought me a lot of DVDs whenever I was younger, and the first time I seen a Friday the 13th entry, I just honestly fell in love with it. It felt very rhythmic in a way. It really seemed to know what it was doing compared to a lot of other low budget slashers at the time that had a lot of hits and misses, lots of parts that didn't go as smoothly as they could have. Whereas, as I was saying, the first seven of them go so smooth. But in recent years, it's got an even more special place in my heart because it was one of the three franchises that I focused on in my PhD thesis. So I got to really go into the political, cultural, and social meanings of the franchise. And I uncovered so much that people tend to neglect in the readings. They think, fun, stupid slasher, but really it's showing the heart of Americana that they don't want you to see. This violence and the blood beneath the soil, and I could go on all day, so I'll just stop myself there.
You're fine. I'm enjoying listening to you, John. So talk away, and Adam and Gav, if you want to interject at any point, far away. I mean, it's a weird one. We look back now, the 1980 original. It's dated by today's standards for a horror audience, but the practical effects are still a thing of beauty. They still stand the test of time for me. I had the genuine pleasure when Sean Cunningham was here in Belfast as a guest at the Belfast Film Festival. I did a live on stage with him at the Strand, and it was fab. Just a great eccentric guy who, I don't think he's invested in horror as, say, the likes of maybe John Carpenter or the likes of Wes Craven, who I know he worked with on House of the Left. He Last House of the Left, he crossed the divide long before Jason did. But I think he's someone that got the kind of commercial aspects of that. He knew that he could create something, because Friday the 13th, it's coming on the back of Halloween, of course. It's running on that. It just happens to be that it is a huge box office success. Gav, Adam, do you want to share some love for, I know we're not going to spend too much time on every individual film, but I guess we do have to start with the original, Sean Cunningham's original, before we go any further. Adam, Gav, want to interject?
Yeah, well, just a little bit on Sean Cunningham there. Obviously, you said, he's maybe not the horror person like Carpenter or Wes Craven, but he knew what he was doing when he created this franchise, or was one of the creators behind the franchise. Bit of controversy about who actually created it. But yeah, he just wanted a hit, so he clearly seen that Halloween was a big hit and essentially just kind of copied the tropes of Halloween. But I do think Jason and the entire franchise created its own type of slasher as they released the films. But I have a huge affection for the original 1980 classic.
You guys, frankly, was that one of your early screenings? I know you've screened Friday. I don't think it was your first, or was it your first?
It was our third. So we screened it on Friday the 13th. It was in March 2020, so it was actually the week before lockdown, and then we completely went into lockdown the week after. So we didn't even know we were going to screen it. We kind of thought we were going to be told that it wasn't happening, but we were lucky that it did happen in the end. It was a nice wee turnout, a great atmosphere in the room that day. But yeah, I mean, I love the original. I think I love it because of Betsy Palmer. I think that she's fantastic in this, and she does sort of get forgotten about because of who Jason becomes in the third film, really, when he gets that hockey mask, and then he becomes the character that he does become after that, and she kind of gets forgotten about. I know she turns up in flashbacks occasionally, and then obviously she turns up in Freddy vs. Jason in quite a few memorable scenes. But yeah, I just love how primitive it is, and kind of it's just classic. It's just a classic film for me.
Yeah, without a doubt. And the thing I love about the first movie in particular is that it inflects the idea of Psycho. So in Psycho, we have Norman Bates. He's masquerading as his mother. He's carrying out these murders. People thinks it's Mrs. Bates. But here we have an inflection of that. It's kind of reversing that. And I think that's quite clever. It's a straightforward idea. When Mrs. Voorhees first shows up, it's like, here we go. She's here to save the day. Oh, no. she's not. And yeah, the practical effects in that film, rewatching it, because I think it was last year the Strand screened the film. I was able to get down and watch it in October, and just a lot of fun. It's just a popcorn slasher. It's a different beast, I think, than Halloween. Halloween is all about the tension and how far, as like Carpenter himself talks about that, about how far you can pull that elastic before it snaps back. This is a film, the Friday the 13th film it's playing it for its audience, it's playing for the box office. It was made for like, what, 500 grand? Pretty cheap. And made a lot of money at the box office. So, John, I want to come back to you. John, tell us a little bit more then about your PhD. I'm intrigued about that. I'm always intrigued when people do their PhDs on horror topics, because I'm like, I could be friends with these peeps.
Well, the reaction to my PhD has always been, really, that's what you're doing? That's what you're spending the next 3 years of your life on? But for me, it was the best thing I ever could have done. Basically, what I wanted to do was recontextualize the slasher subgenre into the culture that spawned it, a culture that denies it and tries to say these are meaningless films. These are films that can't say anything about us or the world we live in. And I also wanted to... Sorry, have I frozen? Oh. I also wanted to redefine the core components of the slasher film, the killer, the survivors, the victims, and what role they actually play. Because typically, whenever you say slasher film, people tend to think of a barely dressed woman running through the woods and being hacked to pieces, or just numbers dwindling. But there's so much more to that in the interplay between the relationships between these different components. And as I was saying, a third of that total was on Friday the 13th, and I had a lot of fun things to say about the various killers, because we got 3 in this franchise. Technically more if you want to look at Jason Goes to Hell and whatever's going on there with the demon possession.
Do we want to go there?
And we have, by my calculations, about 198 victims, 169 of those by Jason himself.
I like to think, John, that you have a little tally score. I like to think that you watch these movies and just kind of went 1, 2, 3. There's a couple of that Jason gets 2 for 1s. Quite a few in the franchise. He gets a few 2 for 1. So hope you're tallying these up correctly.
No, there's a part in the thesis where I've got my tally work. I actually do have tally on there. Big old content analysis of numbers, durations, of times, and it turns out you could make a full feature film just from the compilation of kills from the Friday the 13th franchise.
What I'm hoping, John, is that someone turned to you and said, "Can you please show your work, please?"
I have graphs and charts and so many different variations of red for Jason's kills, for Roy's kills, for Pamela's.
All I can say is I'm imagining, John, that we don't want to see the other side of your computer screen. It's just a thing of people might just be having some kind of questions about yourself. Adam, you've been quiet for a little while. We've all been getting all kind of PhD, and Gav's been reminiscing about the screening of Friday the 13th. Come back to the movie. As I say, we have to champion Betsy Palmer's great in that. I mean, she just has the voice and everything, and how she turns from this friendly kind of person that comes across our damsel in distress, Alice, I think, from the top of my head. I'm pulling that from somewhere. Mm-hmm. But and then she turns to Ultra Menace.
I just want to touch back on what John said, that Friday 13th has a perfect 7-movie run. There was also another franchise that does that, the Police Academy franchise.
Just as horrifying.
Another slasher.
The kill count is higher than Jason's. It's weird.
Once Gutenberg left, it was dead to me.
Mission to Moscow.
Mm-hmm. Ron Perlman.
Political. But yeah, the first Friday the 13th, I think having the mother as a twist is often forgot about when talked about the movie. People just associate Jason with the movie, but it is what makes the first one a little bit more special, especially when it comes to the second film, which we'll move on to in a bit. But it kind of, you watch the movie not knowing it's Jason, or not knowing it's the mother, thinking it is Jason, and you're like, how is this 70-year-old woman doing all of this? She has the strength of a god. But it's a fun watch. There's some shots in it that go on way too long. There's the shot where one of the girls is walking through the town and we see every single step and you're like, oh my God, come on, please. But fun kills, Kevin Bacon. You can't deny a slice of bacon. He's always a treat to watch.
Always is, and he skewers well.
Mm-hmm.
You can skewer a bit of bacon pretty good. I think I have a lot of love for 1, and I think 2's often the forgotten. I'm going to say now, 2's not my favourite. It's not the one I'm going to pick out as my favourite within the series, but I think 2 gets often overlooked within the series, particularly that opening sequence with Alice, because often we don't really see that. I know we kind of get it sometimes with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and I guess with the Halloween and probably every other slasher sequel we can possibly think of. Let's not talk about the Rob Zombie Halloween, what they do with their protagonist after they've been through trauma. But I think it's an interesting thing that they do with Alice at the start of that film. It's just a shame that it lasts 5 minutes, and then it kind of goes straight back to Camp Crystal Lake and all hell is breaking loose. Although this time it's Jason and we have a girl who's only too happy to get a dead woman's sweater on and tell Jason what to do. I don't think I'd want to do that in that situation, but that's just me. I don't know at this point, do we want to open it up? Well, I'll come to you, Gav. I mean, and there's a danger, I guess, we could all be picking the same one as our favourites. I don't know. But I'm going to come to you first, Gav, and say, if we're looking at this series as a whole, what would be the one? It's Friday the 13th. It's September 2024. What are you going to be after this recording? After you've put up with us and said, fuck this, thank God that's over and done with. What are you going to be sticking on this evening?
Right, okay. So bear with me here. I'm very fond of part 4. The final chapter, mainly because of Crispin Glover's sexy wee dance, and also we get a wee bald head at Corey Feldman. I'm also a fan of Zombie Jason from Jason Lives, and I do quite like the Carrie versus Jason 1-2, which is Kane Hodder's first appearance. But the one I'm going to go with, and it's a bit of a cheat, but I don't care, and I sort of picked it because I had an idea that none of you guys would pick this one. And I feel like John might hate me for this, but I'm going to go with Freddy versus Jason. and it's mainly because I love Freddy Krueger, but also it was the first one that I ever saw on the big screen. It was the first time I ever saw Jason Voorhees on the big screen. I went to the cinema to see it when it came out in 2003, and I was a little bit obsessed with this film, mostly, like I said, because of my love for Freddy Krueger. But this was the first time that I saw Jason on the big screen, and it made me then go back and watch I don't know if I watched them all, but I definitely went back and watched some of the Friday the 13th films after this, because at that point I'd probably seen a few of them, or at least seen certain scenes from certain films, but I wasn't aware of his whole backstory and the lore, and so it gave me a bit of an affection for Jason, and that's why I picked this one. But I feel like I'm going to be fucking cursed out here now.
I'm not going to hate you, because I, like you, have a lot of love for Freddy vs. Jason. It's cheesy as hell. It's not scary. It's dealing with our two central protagonists of sort by this point are pop culture. They're not scary. I don't think the fear factor's there for them anymore. I mean, for the promo for this, didn't they have a big kind of weigh-in at Vegas, if I remember right? Yes, Clash of the Titans, and I know they changed the actor from Kane Hodder they just wanted the size, and I kind of get that. It's not one I wouldn't pick. It's not the one I've picked as my favourite, but it was on my maybe list, Gav. So maybe you're not going to find the hatred that you were worried about. You're amongst friends.
It was a strategic call, because I had an idea that you guys would not pick that one, and I didn't want to pick one that I thought that you might pick. So I thought I'll go with this one, and we can chat about this one if you want. But I didn't think you should pick it, so it was all strategy.
Everyone might be really. I think people will probably be more disgusted with my pick, but we'll come to that in just a moment.
Better not be part 3.
No, it's not 3. Anybody else?
Charms.
Anybody else want to show some love for Freddy vs. Jason? Oh, there's
There was
silence,
a
Gav.
period where my Twitter page was basically just a hate account for Freddy versus Jason. Might have been a 3-month period.
Look, it's not perfect. Obviously, we know what it is, but I love the return of Betsy Palmer. Big fan of her. I think Monica Keena is a worthy scream queen. Um, you know, early Catherine Isabel. It's always good to see, and it was directed by Ronnie Yu, who's just a mad director. But he loves a good thunderstorm. Does our Ronnie and theatrical lighting? But it's just chaotic. It's chaotic and it's fun. It's probably out of all of them is the most popcorn movie, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just a lot of fun.
And you're saying that from a series with Friday the 13th that sent Jason into space.
I am. Yep.
Okay, because that was the other one that for me that was on my list of maybes, because I have a lot of love for Jason X, just because it's like we don't know what to do with this franchise. What the fuck do we do now? We've had Jason Goes to Hell. Yeah, Jason X is set. It's after Jason Goes to Hell, isn't it? It kind of retcons that, yeah. And it's like we don't know what to do. Fuck it, send him into. It's like for me, Jason X, the production team meeting, the pre-production discussion on that is up there for me with Gremlins 2. That's all Jim, I'm gonna.
Jim, don't forget who sends them into space. David Cronenberg.
Hey, in mind as well, you could argue another slasher franchise sent them into space. This all span off from a joke in The Curse of Michael Myers, whereas somebody calls into the radio station that Dr. Loomis is listening saying, Michael has been sent to space. And then 3 years later, they start producing Jason Goes to Space.
True. This is true. I have a love for it, and I think is it Mecha Jason or whatever it is, the kind of
Uber Jason,
the super improved, and there's the sequence in the holodeck where it's like it's the two girls like we're gonna have premarital sex and do drugs, and it just cuts to 2 seconds later, and it's just him with the two girls in the sleeping bag just fucking hitting them against the tree. I'm in my 40s. I'm easily pleased at times. That's all I'm going to say. We're all in a safe place here. So yeah, Freddy versus Jason, I have a soft spot for. Adam, you didn't say anything when we mentioned Freddy versus Jason, so you're not going to share some love?
I was just thinking about Jason sandwiching the two people in the bed. That's probably one of my favorite kills. Freddy versus Jason to me was the introduction to both characters, and I remember sticking on a version of it that I got in Nuts Corner, and the first few minutes of like Freddy's eyes, I seen and turned it off and thought I could never watch this. Then I also
can I ask, was it because you were scared or because you thought it was shit?
Because I was scared. I was like, "Who's this evil man?" I remember whenever Forbidden Planet was behind Castle Court, there was a cutout of Freddy Krueger as soon as you entered, and then I never wanted to go into that shop again. Of course, now spent thousands in that shop, which
you're never fucking out of it.
I know.
Somebody at Forbidden Planet needs to get a Freddy Krueger or cardboard cutout just at the door, just with your face on it, going, "I'm watching you, Adam."
But the film itself, I think, is, it's super dated. It felt super dated at the time, and it is very cheesy. But coming from it at a Ronnie Yu angle, who I love, who did Bride of Chucky, I think Freddy vs. Jason is a lot of fun. There's a lot of stupid moments in it. There's a bit that has Jay and Silent Bob in it, pretty much. And a lot of the kills that are great, but also Kelly Rowland in it. And you can't deny a bit of Kelly Rowland.
No, she's always hanging. If she's not hanging about with Nelly, she's hanging about with Jason. I actually quite like the concept in the end of how they get them together. And having read, isn't it, Slash of the Titans, the book as well? It's based on kind of all the various kind of ideas that they came up with over the years until they finally came up with this. I think at one point, wasn't it going to be like the Cult of Freddy? I think if I remember right, they talked about all this kind of weird stuff. And in the end, it just comes down to, well, we've come up with a drug. Kids don't dream anymore. Freddy's going to need Jason to kind of go in and scare some kids again. Yeah, pretty simple. It's the first one I saw in the cinema of all of them, and the first when it was upon release. I saw it in there, and yeah, I think there's good things in Freddy vs. Jason. I'm gutted we never got a sequel. I'm kind of glad we didn't have all the various connotations that they talked about. I think at one point Bruce Campbell was going to throw into the mix, Pinhead, Michael Myers, everybody. I think at one point, Chucky. But yeah, it's a film with its charm. So there's no hatred there for your choice, Gav. So Adam, go on. I was going ahead.
No, I was just going to say you can't deny, that scene where Jason is on fire and he's just chopping down teenagers in a big field during a party. That is a fucking class scene. You can't deny it. I don't care who you are. That is a great scene.
That's happened many a night in kind of Larn direction. Yeah.
The only Jason crossover I think I enjoyed was Jason versus Leatherface, a comic from, I want to say, the mid-90s. And it's nonsense in the most fun way possible. Somehow he ends up in Texas. They drag him up from the lake. And becomes best pals with Leatherface.
Who wouldn't? Nice guy. He's a family guy.
A fella that can make a good barbecue.
Did they become like a tag team and just go around killing teenagers?
They turn on the family, Leatherface's family, because they want Jason to come and be a killing machine because that's what Jason does. And I think he tries to find a family instead, which they aren't a big fan of.
Very good. Very good.
This might be worth seeking out because I know there's been a few. Isn't there a crossover with Evil Dead? I think I have somewhere in my little
Freddy
box.
versus Jason versus Ash, and then there was a sequel to series that as well.
Yeah, I'm nearly certain I have that. Adam, this is the point then where you can weigh in. Are you going to be as out there as Gav, or what are you going with for your favourite entry within the series?
I will say that the one I've rewatched the most is probably 4. I love the guy in the hospital that's like, Jesus Christ, Jesus, when he gets scared. But the one I find revisiting most is probably those damn enchiladas. And Jason Takes Manhattan. A movie that's called Jason Takes Manhattan, he's in Manhattan for about 45 seconds before he's teleported to Canada. But it takes mostly place on a boat. There's a lot of stupid moments in it. Those damn enchiladas is a quote and a song that I often listen to. And he punches a man's head off into a bin. What can you not like about it?
He does. Isn't it the boxer guy? The guy that kind of sits boxing away, and then he just, the old one-punch Jason. And then isn't the sequence on Times Square where he kind of like just lifts up the mask? It's like, yeah, this is kind of the zombie Jason that we love. It's the Kane Hodder Jason, I guess, that many of us think about. On that note, I mean, does anybody? I mean, Kane Hodder is everyone's go-to Jason for many. I think 3 films I think he did within the series. I might be getting that wrong. Maybe it's 4. But is Kane Hodder your Jason? For me, I have a soft, isn't it? CJ Graham in 6. I think he's just a little bit more robust and a little bit more physical. He gets round a paintballing course a bit better than I think Kane Hodder would. But who are other people's go-to Jasons?
I would go definitely Kane. I think most people would say Kane Hodder, but I would agree with you, Jim. CJ Graham and Jason Lives. He moves a wee bit quicker. He's a bit scarier, I think, as well. I do quite like Richard Brooker from the third one. Sorry, he's the first one to wear the mask, I believe. Although he is a bit more robotic, but he's just got a nice. He's quite bulky, and he's wearing that mask underneath the hockey mask, so his shoulders look really big, and he's very hulking.
You're getting a wee bit flustered there, Gav.
I'm getting a wee. I have to just maneuver myself on my chair here. But no, like they're all good, I think. But I would go with CJ Graham for me. I think is the scariest one.
Yeah, I have a fab. John, Adam, where do you want to weigh in on that subject?
Ari Lehman's probably the scariest Jason from that jump scare at the end of the first one. definitely scariest, but my favorite performance probably either the Jason from 3 or 4. Not too sure of the actor who played Jason in 4, but Richard Brooker in part 3, there's this wonderful, just animalistic relentlessness. It feels like he will chase you to the end of the earth. Whereas 4, it's quite different. It feels a lot more methodical and thought out, and it's a Jason that can just appear from anywhere. Two completely different performances, but somehow work fantastically together.
It was Ted White, I think, in 4.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and I think his mask is a bit wider because he's got big ears as well, so they had to make the mask wider.
Yeah,
That's great. Really adds the folklore element.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say this right. I have a soft spot for 4, but I don't love 4. It's not to say that I hate 4 in any way.
We ball Corey Feldman. No,
other than little Corey Feldman just kind of going full fucking, I'm just gonna chop up this poor old Jason at the end of this film. You've got that sexy dancing going on with Crispin Glover, but I don't know. I think it's because when you watch it, it's that sense when you get into a series and then people kind of go, oh, like, skip this one, don't bother that one, watch 4. 4 is the best. And maybe that's why I went in with kind of skewed vision of it. I went in with higher expectations. Rewatching it today, because I finished work early, I had a little mini Friday the 13th marathon just to kind of refresh myself. There's a lot of, weirdly, I know a lot of people talk about the influence of part 6 for Scream, in the sense that it's quite willing to have a little bit of fun at itself and at the franchise. There's a lot of Scream, I think, in 4. I guess it's that sense when you've got the confines of it's all taken in a house. I guess it's the finale of Scream as opposed to the whole film itself. But that's what it reminded me of. It kind of looks for me like that. I don't mean I'm being predictable. I mean, I love 6, and that's because I remember watching 6 on a little small little TV. I'm pretty certain it was black and white, and that sequence with the RV is just something for me that when you're watching that, when you're not, I don't know, I've no idea what age I was. No idea what age I was, because I can remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street coming round. My dad had recorded it off TV. And I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this. And my dad, well, yeah, fuck it. You want to watch this? Don't come crying to me. And like, it's weird how little moments from films can just get ingrained in your head. It's like the sequence, which looks shit in Nightmare on Elm Street, when Jason's walking down the alleyway with his arms extended. When you're like 10, I'm going to say maybe 11, that's freaky. That's terrifying. And in a sense, it's the 2 scenes from 6 that are stuck in my head. There is actually 3. There's the sequence in the RV where he pushes the girls when she's in the bathroom and just pushes her face through the side of the RV, and you just see the imprint. The sequence later on where he's just standing on top of it on flames. I just think that's just a great kind of little mini pop culture moment. And for some reason, the sequence near the end when he's just walking past the window, slow and methodically, and the camera's just panning, and we just see him. I just think it's fab. And that was why, I know, Fright Club, you screened the Friday the 13th, the first one, when we took the opportunity many years ago to screen a Friday the 13th movie, we picked 6, because, I know I've mentioned this earlier on, that's the Jason that we know from pop culture. That's where we see him appearing on screen for the first time. 6 has its cheesy moments. There's the bit, rewatching it today, the bit in the, as I alluded to earlier, the paintballing sequence is just weird. And there's some of the death sequences, like the couple in the car, and they're like try and scare him. No one will move. And then she's like throwing money at Jason. Go here, take some money. Jason don't want money. He just likes, he's like a T-Rex. He just wants to hunt. That's what he likes to do. But John, maybe we've kept the best to the last. And there's one entry I guess none of us have mentioned that I think maybe we should talk about before we wrap up. But maybe that might be the entry that John picks. Yeah. John, where are you going to weigh in for your favourite entry within the Friday the 13th franchise?
See, whenever you asked me last night what was the favorite, that almost led me to a panic attack because it's almost like a Sophie's Choice where there's 9 children. There's three that I know are going, and 9 that I have to choose from.
John, what I'm picturing now is Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, just in the sequence where they're trying to send all the mail. Is it Pepe Silla?
Pepe Sylvia.
Yeah, Pepe Sylvia. That's what I'm picturing now in my head. I apologise for that panic attack I put on you, but I am going to put you on the spot because I'm a bastard.
Fuck. Where do I even start? Part 4 to me is basically the perfect slasher film. It's 10 years into the subgenre and everything feels perfected, form and content and style. And I get why that's most people's favorite. I agree with what you're saying with part 6, and it makes it a strong contender. This is the iconic Jason. This is the fully formed, the result of all this folklore that's been building up.
Go on, John. Pick
But
5.
the
Go on.
one-
Go on. Pick 5. Everyone loves 5.
The 2 that I watched today were 2 and 5. And whenever I had to choose between all of them to rewatch just to prepare for this, it was 2 and 5.
Is that because you thought for a second that you misremembered at the end of 2 that it was actually the dog was the killer? When the dog just kind of pops up at the very end, the dog manages to knock the door, and it's like, I forget what the name of what their pet is called, but
No,
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and then now Jason jumps through the window. Sorry, kids, again, spoiler, but go and fucking watch the movie. But
by the way, one of those great Paramount cutaway scenes. The dog runs towards Jason in the forest, looks up, gives a little once, and it just cuts the hot dogs. Something that the Paramount slashers all did. Fantastic stuff. 2 has a great sense of humor.
Is it 2 that has one of the worst kind of just crash edit points where isn't it 2 with the guy in the wheelchair and he's going down the stair? Yeah, and he's just falling down the stairs, and it just, I think it was just a whitewash, and then it just kind of cuts to something else.
Well, they loved the fade to white in the first one and the second one, then they slowly started putting it away. So that was more of like, they thought it was a hallmark of the series more so than like a stylistic choice for that particular kill. So it was very much suffered from being a sequel in that regard. But part 5,
No.
that is such a wonderfully original and messy and sweaty film. When you watch
Thank you, John. Thank you, because you've kind of preempted me. I watched 5 today, and I remember watching 5 when I was much younger and going, turned into Nan from Catherine Tate's Now, what a load of shit. But I think there's an interesting idea at its core. And you look at all these franchises, I think maybe Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street hasn't done this, where they've done the kind of the fake out or the swapping over, they're trying to change over. Halloween has definitely done that. Halloween did that with 3, the night he didn't come home. And then I know with 4, a lot of people love Halloween 4. I'm not a lover of that film.
Great film.
We'll fall out about it another day, John. But it kind of leaves us at the point where possibly, I know we have 5 and 6. I've been obviously retconned that. And hey, let's not talk about those movies too much. But with 4, I guess you get the sense that they could be passing off the baton. They kind of did this at the end of, they attempted this with the end of 4. And then in 5, with this, there's no Jason. Well, there is Jason. There is Jason, but it's not our Jason.
Most of the Friday the 13th films, it almost feels like there's an attempted passing of the baton. Pamela Voorhees dies at the end of the first one. Jason jumps from the water. Part 2, not so much there. Part 3, we end with Chris falling into psychosis, something that in other franchises is kind of a transitional point to the murderous psychopath. Part 4, you've got Corey Feldman. It zooms onto him and it freezes on him. Part 5, similar thing. He puts on the mask and tries to slash. It isn't until part 6 where they knock that in the head. So like every entry, you kind of have that. But part 5 was the only one that really pulled it off in the worst way possible. Like you have Roy Burns. He walks in for one sequence. You don't see him for a while. He's not really a presence in the film. But then someone will say something, and Roy Burns will jump out and shout, "Are you talking to me, Sheriff? Is that me that you're talking to?" To like he doesn't have a presence in the film, but he tries to force it in a way. On the second rewatch, you think, how did I not know that this film was going to be shoehorned in? Like Jason is ashes, he's burned, he's in the ashtray, and Roy Burns is the most what conspicuous person alive.
Yeah, I rewatched it today as well, and as I said, when I watched it years ago, I was like, "This is shit. This is just this is shit." But rewatching it today, I was like, "There's fun to be had here. There's some good kills, some ways, kind of stylistic choices." I just think the execution is a little bit kind of the narrative itself is just a bit clunky and messy. There's an idea there that's maybe just got lost in the mix. Gav, you were very clear. You were like, no love for 5. I don't know, Adam. You've been very quiet. I mean, where you went? Are you a fan of 5 in this series?
I like that to make him different, they give him the blue stripe instead of the red. That's when you're selling toys. It's a very important thing to do. 5, I don't really remember that much. It's been years since I've watched it. It's the one that if I'm doing a rewatch, I will skip because it's like it's not Jason, so why would I? But I remember there being some fun kills in it. It is just a bit. It feels like they're trying to reinvent the franchise after the last one was called The Final Chapter. So they're like, what the fuck do we do now? But yeah, it's a fun movie, but I can see why people would have been annoyed back in the day with it not being Jason. But it logically makes more sense to pass the torch to somebody else in a franchise. But then obviously the money didn't represent, so they're like, bring him back, even though he's a zombie in the sixth one.
Yeah, I mean, you get that with Halloween 3, which I think is really clever and inventive and trying to do now. And I think now I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I'll not labour on this point. But in that sense, I think now you would get away with the idea of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch easier than back when it was released. Now that we have the internet, we know more about the film industry. It's easier access for people. I guess, when you're selling a Halloween film, people want to know. It's like Ron Seal, they know what they'll want. Is the same with Nightmare on Elm Street movie, Chucky movie, Friday the 13th. We want Jason. So I like it. But John, I shot up across you there as you were going to make a point.
I know it's like the fun thing, the fascinating thing for Friday the 13th Part 5 for me is you can completely ignore Jason, because you have Tommy who is being prepped to be the successor. The whole way through, he is having his break from reality, something that won't be resolved until, the second half of Part 6. And it has this real middle entry of a trilogy approach to Tommy that I find fantastic. Because in most of that film, Jason is just, Jason, Roy Burns is reaching on from off screen. You rarely see him in his full figure attacking anyone. So you do get to focus on the attempted rug pull of Tommy, of him being set up to be the killer, and then the actual rug pull of Roy Burns at the end. When you kind of forget that it's a slasher film, it becomes this real sleazy piece of glory, even. It's the only Friday the 13th film to be directed by a porn director, as far as I'm aware, and it really comes across within that film. Like the type of shots and the way people are framed, it just feels sweaty, as I was saying, and it has this atmosphere and vibe that none of the others even attempt. The rest of them prefer almost like the cool August night, whereas this, everything is drenched. It's a weird analysis of it, but it's interesting.
I'm not a fan of the movie. what I will say is it's definitely the sexiest Friday the 13th. You've got no Jason Voorhees, but you've got, that's kind of counterbalanced by lots of tits and sex scenes. And you said it was directed by a porn director. I didn't actually know that, but you can tell that because there's loads of tits in it. And it's almost like every girl in the film has their moment where they get their breasts out and have some sort of sexual scene, whether it be in a shower or they're waiting for their boyfriend to come back, to get down to business. Which, it is of its time. It's an 80s horror slasher, so you expect that. I do think it's a good idea. It's a decent story. It's a strange time.
I really thought, Gav, you were going to say it's a really good idea to get a porn director to direct it.
Here, that's not a bad idea either. But like, it's a strange time in the franchise to go down that route because you're 5 films deep. Why not just stick with what you know? You know, it was a big risk, obviously, and it didn't really pay off. But I do think that the idea that they have Tommy, who's a bit older in this one, in a house with other troubled teens, and that whole idea, it kind of influenced other films as well. Even a wee bit Dream Warriors-esque. I know they're special powers in Dream Warriors, but that idea where there's teenagers together and they're all sort of suffering some sort of trauma, kind of influenced other films. So there's a good idea there. Just as Jim, you said it was really badly executed.
Yeah, I will say this. I will say this though: the opening of 5, I think, is great. Is Corey Feldman back for that, or is it just a looky like? Yeah,
he's back for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, he was back as a cameo. I think they wanted him back for the full film, but because he was too busy with the Goonies, I think around that time, or he was doing another film, they basically kind of had to rewrite it, and they got him back for a few scenes at the start.
Yeah, because it looks great. I mean, it does. I was watching, I was like, "Fuck!" Have I been saying this anytime I talk about Friday the 13th? That at 6 we see the Jason that we know and love the first time. It's like, oh no, it's a double bluff. It's a dream sequence. It's all in Tommy's head. But yeah, I mean, there's some nice ideas. There's, as here we are, all the lads. There's a lot of boobies in there. I mean, we can. It's not just the Friday the 13th franchise. A lot of them of that time, we look at it now, it's like they have this sleazy eye. It's a very white, heterosexual world that these people find themselves in. It's not till the kind of later on in the franchise, even if that we kind of see any real variance. But look, we have chatted for just over or around an hour. I am going to bring things to a close, but I guess now, as we are 2024 on Friday the 13th, I've mentioned at the start we have, I think it's Crystal Lake, I think is the series that's in development hell. I think Brian Fuller has left. I think they've brought a new showrunner in to take over. It seems to be back on. Excited by this. We've had the Scream TV series. That went well. So I don't know. And I know we've kind of had the Friday the 13th TV show was kind of a spin-off in the same way like Freddy's Nightmares, I can't remember what that was called, was another like kind of little spin-off from the Nightmare on Elm Street. There was a series I have a real soft spot for. But your hopes for the future, it's been a while. Is it 2013 was Jason's last big, I can't remember what time.
2010.
2010, yeah.
With the remake that's essentially kind of, I guess, maybe 1 and 2 combined together into one movie. Stylistically, there's some good points, but I think it's a mess of a film. But, it's been a long time. I know we've had the Halloween franchise back. We've had the Exorcist franchise back. We'll not talk too much about Believer. But, it seems like the big two, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, the Friday the 13th franchise, it's been a while. And I know there's been the video games, etc. Other mediums are available. But do you think Crystal Lake, would you be excited by that, gentlemen, as we wrap things up? The future of the Friday the 13th series, what would you like to see happen? Do you want to see Jason come back from space? Adam, what about you?
I think, as we haven't really spoke about the remake a lot, but the one aspect of the remake that I actually really like is Derek Myers as Jason. I think he's a powerhouse of like energy when he comes towards his victims in those movies. Even though those movies are dog shit, I hope that the TV show kind of either brings him back or brings back that sort of energy, because being a TV show, whether it be 22 minutes or like a 45-minute show a week, it's gonna need to do something different. The Scream TV show, I think I might be one of the only people that actually liked it, because it sort of adds to the mythology, not of Ghostface, but the like sort of tragic figure with a bad past affected a new group of teens, and Crystal Lake could do that, or it could just be, Hollyoaks, but someone gets killed every week. There's real. It's hard to say. With Brian Fuller, you kind of knew what you were getting in a way because we had Hannibal, and he was able to achieve so much with that being on network TV. It would have been interesting to see what he could do. But the new showrunner, whose name I can't remember, but I know they are the showrunner for the new It. Welcome to London/Londonderry show.
Hi. Hi. You have to forget the hi.
It's a new. We obviously haven't seen it. We've seen like a 10-second clip of it, but at least it looks interesting. And if they're taking that showrunner from that show, obviously they're happy with that show. So to bring him over and get him to do something new with Jason, it's exciting because we had 2010's last time we've seen him. We've had him in video game form. Even though that game was fantastic, it did get shut down because legal issues, and that seems to be Jason's biggest enemy at the minute.
But am I right in saying that when this was first announced, it was announced as a prequel?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how far are they going to go back, and where is it that they're going to pull the story from? And also, is A24 not involved as well? Or they certainly were.
They were.
When it was first announced. I don't know if that's now changed.
I think they still are. I think they still are.
Yeah, I thought they were as well, but you spoke about Brian Fuller. I would have been kind of on board with him because he's got good back. He's done so much good stuff in the past, and he sounded as if he was quite passionate about this. But I don't know where they're going to go with the story. I think it worked with Scream, and it'll work with Welcome to Derry because there's so much they can go to. There's not a lot written about Pennywise's history as such. They can bring in Stephen King who can help them do that as well. With this one, it feels like they're really going to be clutching the straws, and it might just become a frenzy. Let's kill as many people as we can each week, which might be fun, but from a story perspective, I don't think it's going to be very interesting.
The series that comes to mind when I think of kind of what you could do with if you wanted to go down the prequel route is probably like Bates Hotel, which had kind of nice ideas. I just think it because a little bit got drawn out, and then it got to the point where it pretty much tried to remake or got to the point of Psycho was when it really lost interest. When I lost interest for me, is it Rihanna? Am I plucking that out of my head? Where she kind of pops up at the end of that? It had some nice ideas. Again, nice ideas. Execution was a bit meh. I don't know. It's no Psycho 2. That's the special place in my heart. But John, what about you? As we bring things to a close, as someone who's done his PhD on slashers and kind of looked through this franchise and other franchises, what would you like to see Jason pop up in next?
Well, even just to make a note there on Crystal Lake, I don't personally think prequels are justified much. I don't think they really work for most franchises, for any story. You always want to be moving forward, and there's little world building or interesting narrative strands that you can pull at like that. It tends to be fan service and very reactionary. So I personally don't like it. What I would be interested in is if they created a cinematic or a television or a streaming service show that took the general idea of the comic book franchises, the comic book series. They were very much anthologies that took Jason, survivors of Jason, and victims of Jason into completely different and weird territories. For example, there was a one-shot where a girl who has been abused by everyone around her entire life decides to take her scumbag boyfriend for a little trip to Crystal Lake. She knows fine rightly what's going to happen. The boyfriend doesn't. And the comic takes a very fun turn. There's another one where Jason befriends a boy with physical and intellectual disabilities. And he almost, for the first time ever, you see him care for somebody, for something. There's a glimmer of recognition like he does with Tommy in part 4. And he takes him almost the way imagine a bear was to take a lost child through the woods.
I really thought you were going to say takes him. I really thought you were going to say takes him to Disneyland. There's one for me, one for the child, please. I could just imagine them on the teacups, all that kind of thing.
But that anthology idea where it's just little things happen here and there with little connection. I think it's the best way to continue the film franchise, which, yes, is connected in an interesting way, but can be watched on an individual level. You can pick any of them and watch them. And Jason should be much more episodic rather than one narrative that could fit a film stretched out over 10 episodes. Plus, as well, as far as I'm aware, this would the show, the one that's in production or was in production, is a Pamela show, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's set during the period where she'd have poisoned the water or set fire to the place. One of those episodes that's referenced in the first film. And people have been speculating about that period for years. There's deleted scenes of Elias Voorhees, the father. There's stuff in part 9 about the father's demonic lineage and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't interest me. I like what happened in between the films. What did Jason do here after he attacked Chris and disappeared? For the whatever amount of years in between the initial attack and then the attack shown in part 3. Give us a little bit of slice of life. Well, slice of death, I suppose. That's what I would like to see them go next.
All I'm going to say, John, is I think most movie producers would hate those ideas. They're like,
Yep,
we don't want expanded universes. We don't want prequels. Fuck this guy. Get him out of here. This is what we give the people what they want. What's this guy? He likes Friday the 13th Part 5? Fuck him. Get him out there. I jest, of course. Look, I know in this short space of time we've pretty much only scratched the surface, and I'm sure we'll come away from this chat, guys, and think, oh, we should have talked about this. We haven't even mentioned Tom Savini. We've talked about the practical effects, but that masterclass he does. I know he's involved in the first one. Is it the first Part 1 and Part 2?
Part 1 and Part 4?
Yeah, Part 4.
Part 4. Apologies. I just love the fact is when Mrs. Voorhees' head gets chopped off, it's have a look at her hands.
Hairy arms.
It's the hairy arms. I'm pretty certain it's Tom Savini himself. But yeah, I mean, loads of things we will come away from this we haven't talked about. But it's been a lot of fun. We spent an hour. Adam was very doubtful. If you've ever listened to our podcast, you'll know we very rarely get things wrapped up this nice and neatly. But it is Friday the 13th, so I guess we want to go and watch some movies, and we all know what we're going to be watching this evening after picking our faves, and we don't think Gav's going to be going after this to watch 5. So maybe stranger things have happened, but look, on that note, we are going to bring this little kind of live stream / podcast to a close. We are here just to basically kick things off. We're going to be making some announcements soon for the festival. That's going to be happening soon, so keep an eye on the social media page. We'll share stuff as well as in Banterflix. Gav, have you guys anything at Fright Club? Have you announced anything for Halloween yet, or are you in the process?
In the process of talking to people, we will have a Halloween screening coming up and potentially another very exciting screening shortly after that. But we check our podcast out, The Dissection. We have that every 2 weeks on a Sunday evening on Spotify and all your podcast platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you keep an eye on those socials. Adam, we'll probably be doing about 5 more pods about Tom Holland and Spider-Man, just to kind of get through that recording. Listen to the previous pod for our fuck-ups, well, my fuck-ups on that front. And John, have you any plans? Have you made any plans for yourself coming up to Halloween, spooky season? What do you I know we've got up in Derry kind of direction that is Spook Central, but any exciting plans you want to share with us here and now?
Unfortunately, I might be missing Halloween this year. I'm going to a conference in Cork the 2 days beforehand, talking all about horror, the gothic, and the future of both.
But John, I really wanted, when you said you were going to be skipping Halloween, I wanted to be, say, you're going to a conference and it was going to be something completely random, like a conference about chairs, or a conference about, I don't know, something just completely random, like an expo on the Paperweights convention, and you're like, fuck, that's a curveball. So
you know how boringly one track my mind is? It's a paper on Jason Voorhees as modern folklore. Just to make things worse here.
Well,
sold. And I love how we get to this point at the point where we're all going bye, and we're like, we throw that up, but that's how we roll here in this professional game that is podcasting. So, gentlemen, it has been a blast. So, Adam, as always, thank you for co-hosting. John, thank you very much. Gav, thank you very much. We'll have links on this on our socials. So, whatever you get up to, check out everything. Keep an eye on what we have announcements. Keep an eye out on what Fright Club are announcing, and just keep an eye out for Adam generally, because we worry about you sometimes, Adam.
You know, no, I'll do another 20 minutes. But just everybody, that I love you out there. And if you see me out in public, don't approach me.
Don't approach him, especially if he's in his Beetlejuice pajamas. He got his money's worth out of those.
Here, Danny, they're coming your way, man.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you very much.